Good afternoon. The Gaza war has once again forced the international community to confront its values and its contradictions, as Israeli strikes continue to devastate the Strip, leaving tens of thousands dead. And the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza has reignited furious political debates across Europe. At the center of this storm is the EU's long-standing association agreement with Israel, an agreement built on promises of cooperation and shared values, including respect for human rights. But can such a partnership still hold when one side stands accused of war crimes? And as pressure mounts from European citizens, aid organizations and international courts, the European Union finds itself deeply divided between calls for accountability and fears of political fallout. Welcome to In-Depth. The European Union is considering suspending parts of its association agreement with Israel due to concerns over human rights violations in Gaza. A leaked draft reviewed by Politico outlines potential measures including the full or partial suspension of the agreement, which governs trade and political cooperation, while a full suspension would rather require unanimous approval from all 27 EU members. The trade chapter could be suspended by a qualified majority vote. Other options include banning imports from illegal West Bank settlements, restricting Israeli participation in EU programs, and limiting technical cooperation. The review found evidence suggesting Israel violating Article 2 of the agreement. EU foreign ministers will discuss the proposal at a summit on Tuesday.
As the war in Gaza intensifies, the European Union finds itself at a historic crossroads. With civilian casualties in the tens of thousands and humanitarian aid still blocked at the borders, pressure is mounting on Brussels to re-evaluate its long-standing association agreement with Israel. Signed in 1995 and enforced since 2000, the agreement established a framework for economic, political, and trade cooperation on the condition that both sides respect human rights and democratic principles as laid out in Article 2. That clause is now under fire as images of devastation from Gaza fuel protests across Europe and spark fierce debate within EU institutions. France and the Netherlands, along with 17 EU member states, are leading calls to suspend the agreement's trade pillar or impose targeted sanctions, arguing that Israel has violated the terms by continuing indiscriminate strikes and obstructing aid. In contrast, Germany and Italy warn against jeopardizing diplomatic channels, citing risks to regional stability. Divisions within the EU have paralyzed decision-making at a time when clarity is needed most. Human rights groups have submitted urgent reports to EU bodies documenting Israeli war crimes, while citizens demand action that matches Europe's stated values. With international courts reviewing Israel's conduct and reconstruction plans in limbo, the EU must decide whether to prioritize its principles or its political calculations. As the war rages on, Europe's credibility and its role in any future peace hang in the balance.
Well, welcome back. The European Union and Israel have shared political and economic ties for decades. The association agreement signed in 1995 and enforced since 2000 has underpinned this relationship, offering Israel privileged access to European markets and institutions. But Article 2 of that agreement is clear. Continued cooperation depends on the respect for human rights and democratic principles. Now, with the war in Gaza escalating and humanitarian aid blocked from entering the Strip, those principles are under intense scrutiny. Now, for further analysis, we're joined from Geneva by Mr. Gilles-Emmanuel Jacquet, Vice President of the Geneva International Peace Research Institute, and from Cairo, Mrs. Imani Suleiman, Director of the Mediterranean Studies Institute at Alexandria University. We thank you both for joining us. And let me here start by Professor Jaraki. And how has the Gaza war fundamentally changed the EU's relationship with Israel? And what are the main reasons driving the EU's current review of this agreement?
Thanks for your invitation. Well, the conflict in Gaza and human rights violations that could be considered as a genocide sparked division among EU member states. We saw, for example, countries like Spain or Ireland being quite vocal, criticizing the Israeli policy there in Gaza, and even mentioning that it could be a genocide. But at the same time, we have other EU countries that continue to uphold, to support their long-standing alliance with Israel, even when it comes to strategic affairs. And we had as well the President of the European Commission, Ms. von der Leyen, and Ms. Kallas, that repeatedly as well stated their unconditional support to Israel. So the conflict revealed a division within EU member states, but as well, we can see that some EU countries are not at ease with what's going on in Gaza. And that's why I guess they want as well. They cannot stop the genocide, but they think they can at least show some human, let's say, face or respect for values through humanitarian aid.
Right, Professor Suleiman, how have Israeli military operations and the blockade of Gaza influenced the European public opinion and policymakers?
And thanks for having me. Well, we have seen all the demonstrations and the protests in different European capitals. It's obvious that most of the European people are siding with the Palestinians, even if they have sympathy with Israel and with what happened on October 7th. But they think that the retaliation shouldn't be against the Palestinian civilians. Every day, the blockade, and even in the past few weeks, targeting those who are standing in lines in front of the humanitarian aid trucks. This is really infuriating the European anger and making people very angry, seeing that it's injustice. It's not something that anyone can justify in the name of security or in the name of any kind of retaliation or self-defense, as Israel always claim. So for the ordinary European citizen, I think it's now clear who the victim is. As for the policymakers, there are other factors that affect their opinion. First of all, we have to differentiate between the EU as an organization with collective decision-making process and the individual European states. We have seen Spain today and how it was harsh on the Israelis, seen before countries like Ireland, and how they are condemning what Israel is doing, and they want to take action such as armament embargo or partial sanctions or halting the cooperation agreement. While other countries, as you have said in the introduction, they think that we should continue with diplomatic cooperation. We have heard harsh words from the French President Macron after his visit to Cairo. Then what? Nothing really happened in terms of taking action against Israel.
Yes, Ms. Suleiman, let me here take Professor Jaraki in this very particular point and the difference between the EU as a collective body and members of the EU. How do you view the positions of countries like Netherlands and France differ from those of Germany and Italy regarding the agreement, for an instance?
Well, first of all, I agree with the analysis of my colleague, Ms. Suleiman. Now, with regard to how things go on the EU, with regard to the events in Gaza, well, there are countries like Netherlands and France that may see sympathetic towards what's going on in Gaza, but let's be realistic as well. France had a very ambiguous policy. President Macron talked about recognition of Palestinian statehood, sovereignty, but in the end, he changed his mind. And nothing happens. So when it comes to France, you have strong pressure as well from the public opinion, because the public opinion is quite divided and polarized in France, but you have pressure as well with regard to what is going on in Gaza. And Macron maybe made a statement just for more domestic, let's say, political interest. When it comes to the Netherlands, maybe it would be more serious as well to take action compared to France. But as mentioned as well in your introduction, if it comes to suspending the political dialogue with Israel, it requires unanimity. It's not going to happen. And if it comes to suspending some trade preferences, well, in this case, we would have qualified majority, but it's not going to be easy as well, as some countries like Italy or others may resist, may oppose it, and may, in a way, promote Israeli interests.
Right. Professor Suleiman, what do you have on that? And what are the political and economic implications of suspending the trade pillar of the agreement?
The EU is contradicting itself, actually. So, as you said, the second point of the agreement talks about respect of human rights. Also, the EU since 2004 has adopted what they call the human security doctrine, which is based on putting humans before national security traditional concerns. And the EU fails to really apply what it says it's adapting as a normative force in the world. You see human rights violation, you see genocide or war, you see a cleansing of the Palestinian people, but then you say we want the diplomatic channels still open. I think it's a very big break to the image that the EU has been trying to introduce to the world as an organization that is concerned with human rights, concerned with rights of the weak nations and population, and how it would interfere to protect them. Few days after October 7th in 2023, the EU suspended what it was giving to the Palestinian Authority, claiming that everyone taking advantage of these aids are likely affiliated with Hamas. What kind of logic is this? If you're building schools and hospitals and helping with the salaries of the Palestinian Authorities employees, how come that you suspend all this all of a sudden and claim that everyone there is a terrorist? This is not a diplomatic channel. This is siding with the aggressor.
Right. Professor Jacquet, could targeted sanctions or an arms export ban realistically be implemented within the EU framework?
It would be very difficult because in Brussels you have a lot of lobbies from different industries, including the industrial military complex, EU or companies, or let's say European companies, and as well foreign companies. You have as well different forms of support towards not just the Israeli government, but as well the Israeli defense forces, like defensive equipment that were sent to Israel. And even in the case of France, some politicians argued that as long as it's for defensive purposes, it should be accepted. Now it's going to as well show once again that you have a kind of contradiction, as well pointed out by my colleague. You have on one side the European Union talking about values, providing humanitarian help, as long as it doesn't benefit to Hamas. It's like now their new buzzword. And on the other side, they are powerless to stop a genocide. And this contradiction was well identified and criticized by 27 former EU ambassadors, including the former EU ambassador to the Palestinian Authority von Buxdorf and the former EU ambassador to Libya, James Moran.
We'll get back to you about what could realistically be done on the ground, but let me go here to Professor Suleiman. How might the measures taken, particularly the economic part, impact Israel's economy and its regional relations?
Israel is already struggling now with cuts down in the tourism sector, foreign investment sector, and other sectors that relies on connection with the outer world. However, a decision by the EU, which is not likely to happen, or multiple decisions of the countries that are siding with the Palestinian people would really make the Israeli citizen himself put pressure on their government, because Israel is not a country that can really function without the outer. I think they still need the cooperation with the EU countries and the EU organizations separately or in a collective way. Also, they are very keen now to keep the image of the victim, which they cannot with the media coverage that everyone sees in the world what's happening. So what I think is, if countries like perhaps Spain go on with this decision to put sanctions on Israel, torture, all holistic, it would really encourage other countries, not just in Europe, but in other parts of the world, to do the same, which would really make the Israeli government reconsider. Economics is the only thing that would make them rethink what they're doing in Gaza.
Professor Jacquet, what risks does the EU face if it fails to adopt a unified stance on this issue? And as you said, respectively, so what do you think, what could be realistically done on the ground in this case?
Well, the EU will not be able to stop exactions or the genocide. They may not suspend the political dialogue. On the EU level, maybe we'll see next week, there could be measures taken against products, goods coming from the illegal Israeli settlements on Palestinian territories. Then on the more, let's say, national level, we could have some EU member states like Spain or others taking more measures, targeted sanctions and travel bans against political figures, against products as well, campaigns of boycott. And we could have as well citizen networks like the BDS, for example, or other NGOs or citizen groups that could launch increased campaigns against Israeli products, because it's not just about the products coming from the settlements as well. It can be on products coming from Israel as such. There could be maybe some retaliations from Israel, but I don't know which types of retaliation the EU countries could face. Maybe we could have indirectly US sanctions, for example, taken against EU leaders, not the members, I mean, of the European Commission, but the national leaders like, I don't know, Spanish politicians, Irish politicians, or others.
Or the tariffs, for an instant?
It could be as well. Yeah.
Professor Suleiman, how does the EU's internal division affect its credibility as a promoter of human rights and peace?
Well, as I was saying, they claimed to adopt the human security doctrine since 2004 and then since 2007. This is not their first failure. We have seen this before between 2014 and 2007 during the Eastern Mediterranean refugees crisis. And now we're seeing it also with the ethnic cleansing in Palestine. The credibility is not there in front of their people and in front of the world. Geographically, they are the if I may say, world power closest to Israel, and with a lot of economic entangled interests since the Euro Commission in the 1970s. A lot could have been done in terms of embargoes, in terms of boycotts, and the EU doesn't really do any of this. Furthermore, it's putting barriers to give either money or aids to the Palestinians on claims of these things reaching Hamas. So the credibility internally and in front of the world is really cracked, and I don't think that this is something that can have a remedy any soon.
Professor Jacquet, how can the EU balance its strategic interests with its commitment to international law and human rights? And can the EU act effectively as a unified body when major powers like Germany and Italy oppose any punitive actions?
Well, let's say we already have the answer, as long as you have some EU member states like Italy, Germany, but you have as well members of the top, let's say, layers of the EU leadership like Ms. von der Leyen or Ms. Kallas, that repeatedly stated their unconditional support to Israel, political and military and economic support. Well, there is nothing really we can expect in terms of effective action with regard to the human rights of the Palestinians. And it was obvious since the beginning of this crisis. That's why, as well, some international jurists and lawyers as well organized themselves through networks to launch action against Ms. von der Leyen, Ms. Kallas, and other members of the EU leadership. Because it seems that in the end as well, the EU values, the defense of human rights, it's quite selective. And it seems that the recent decision from the EAS to provide humanitarian help to Palestinians that will be in fact under Israeli control, let's be clear, it's just a way maybe to alleviate, to compensate for the bad conscience they have, because they know they are powerless to stop the genocide, and they will be as well powerless to stop, let's say, massive displacement, forced displacement of Palestinians to neighboring countries.
Professor Suleiman, with not the controversial or the contradicting ways or the contradicting actions of European countries, members of the European parliaments here, do you believe that Europe at large can really play a constructive role in post-war reconstruction or even peace if it continues its current stance?
Well, we all know that the reconstruction, if ever started, is going also to be determined by Israel. We have to give a green light for certain companies or whoever to get into the reconstruction. And with what the EU is doing today, it's going to be rewarded with a big share of the pie of the reconstruction. I don't have any doubts about this. And maybe this is one of the concerns they have. They want to have a footstand in the ever happen after war Gaza. I don't think that reconstruction is something that is going to be happening with good intentions. Only it's also going to happen with economic calculations. And in this case, the EU with its companies will be a good and logistically very suitable player in the reconstruction plan with other countries from the region. Mm-hmm. I think they are going to help in the reconstruction, except for those who are now against Israel. They will have a smaller share, let's say countries like Spain or Ireland. Maybe the Israelis will not welcome them there. We've seen the Spanish Prime Minister and how he spoke about Israel today and said that it's leading one of the darkest cycles and scenes of the 21st century, and it's a disgrace to humanity and all this. And I don't think that the reconstruction is going to happen any soon anyway. Even if it happened, it would be limited. So yeah, the EU will be there and will be rewarded for its silence, of course.
Mm. Professor Jacqui, are there or were there any precedents for the EU suspending or revising association agreements based on human rights concerns before?
Oh, I'm sorry, no knowledge. I'm not informed on this very specific issue. But I know and I haven't, let's say, dug into this very specific issue.
So how about precedents concerning other conflicts that occurred and their position towards that conflicts regarding war crimes that were committed or any of the we've seen, of course, before
the European Union.
Yes, please do. Please.
The European Union has different tools as well to exercise pressure on countries. For example, it can use sanctions and travel bans and asset freezes against political leaders. The European Union did that, for example, to exercise pressure on the leaders of the Transnistrian Republic, or breakaway republic in Moldova, just at the border with Ukraine. It adopted as well similar sanctions against members of Al-Qaeda, against members of the previous Syrian government. So the European Union is not totally powerless against Israel, but it lacks the proper political will to take these measures. Mr. Netanyahu came several times to the European Union. Some of his colleagues as well are able to come freely. So there are tools that the European Union can use, but I don't think the European Union will use these tools like sanctions, travel bans, or assets freezes against members of the current Israeli government.
They will not?
No, I don't think so, because otherwise it contradicts, the statements from Ms. von der Leyen and Ms. Kallas. It would as well be opposed by countries like maybe Italy, I guess, or Germany. So Israeli leaders can, I think, sleep well. They're not going to face any serious sanctions from the EU yet.
Mm-hmm. Professor Suleiman, do you think this is a kind of test that could reveal the EU's ability to act as a unified global actor in conflict resolutions?
This is not the first time that the EU fails to determine something in terms of external politics unanimity. It's hard to take a unified stance, especially when it comes to external politics. We've seen this before, as I said, in the Mediterranean refugees crisis, where countries were welcoming the refugees and others were banning them, and some were putting them in isolation, and then others were just shooting on the rescue boats. This is not the first time we see the EU incapable of taking a unified decision regarding something related to the outer world. The problem is when it comes to individual states, there are big differences in terms of priority, in terms of the history of relations with the Arab world, especially with the Palestinian issue. Also the fear of anti-Semitism accusations. All these factors are making several European countries hesitant to take action or trying to avoid the issue altogether, while others are really trying to do something on the ground. So I think the EU, as everyone knows, is somehow successfully in terms of domestic politics, in terms of economy, but when it comes to external issues and decision making, this is not their first failure, and I don't think that this can change any soon. Not just related in relation to the Palestinian issue, but in relation to other issues as well. The only thing they had a unified stand against was the Russian-Ukrainian war, and that's
right. Professor Jacquet, what do you foresee as the next steps for the EU in this ongoing review and the broader conflict?
Well, it's very difficult to make accurate predictions, and it's not really what I do usually, but in this case, we'll have to wait for the 15th of July to see what will be the decision from the European Union when it comes to this association with Israel, and more clearly about the trade preferences, because maybe there'll be some results, some very, let's say, shy results. Maybe we may see, I don't know, products from the Israeli settlements being banned on the European markets. But say we may have as well bad surprises. Then following that as well, we may see more division and polarization as well between EU member states, and we may see EU member states taking some individual action or measures against, if not the Israeli government, against maybe Israeli trade interests.
Right. I just wanted to ask Professor Suleiman briefly about what image and message would the suspension of EU-Israel agreement send to the world, particularly with regard to the West's commitments to the international law? Briefly, because I have only 1 minute left for me here.
In a perfect world, if this happened, it will be a very strong message to Israel and to other countries of the world to take action in favor of the Palestinians. But I agree with your esteemed guest, it's not going to happen.
Remains to be seen. And unfortunately, those were the last words. But thank you so much, Mr. Relay Emmanuel Jacqui and Ms. Mani Suleiman, for your very valuable insights into this deeply complex and urgent issue. And I guess the Gaza war has shaken the foundations of diplomacy, and Europe must now decide, will it uphold its values or protect its interests? That concludes today's episode of In Depth. Many thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.